Pitts, and I'm going to be discussing whether or not violent video games has a link to violence in youth. And throughout my research for preparing this speech, I looked at several different essays starting in 2013 up to now. My first article, which I read, was by CBS News, and the title of it was Violent Video Games and Mass Violence, a Complex Link. This was recently written in 2013 after the events of Sandy Hook. The writer had a huge influence on discovering who the shooter was for that event. And we found within the article's investigation that the shooter had an influence of video games, specifically violent video games. And we tend to, as the public, blame what the violence is linked to, which were the video games. A professional, Dr. Christopher Ferguson, who was a department chair of the Psychiatric and Communications at Texas A&M, did a study for this, and whether or not the video games were linked to his actions. And it found that instead of the video games being the actions, instead it was a mental health component. The mental health plus the violent video games led to the shooting occurring. And I found this to be interesting, so I wanted to know more. I went to the American Psychiatric Association of America and found that they had an article on the review on the link between violent video games and aggression in youth. This was written a year later, on August 15th, 2014, and it found that there wasn't enough proof through studies that have been conducted recently, and it quickly dismissed the research that other professors have done in the past. And then I went further and tried to look up a more recent article, which I found by Quartz, a site that publishes research, and it did research looking into two studies. One that was conducted in 2012 and another one conducted in 2013. And it would look between the two studies and see if there were consistencies. This was written in April 5th, 2017, so relatively recently, and it found that both articles had no good research or stable grounds to hold this research to be true. So there is no link. So what I've read is there is no link that solidly confirms that violent video games has a contribution or a link, like I said, to violence in youth or in adults even. And I think it's more of, instead of being violent video games be the blame, I think it's more of, and I found in all of these articles, it's more of a mental health component. Mental health contributes to how a person behaves and reacts. I think poor mental health contributes to violence. It doesn't necessarily blame video games, but video games does have a contribution to this violence. It's the one plus the other contributes to the whole. So I wouldn't say that violent video games is the main contributor or the main cause, but it does have a link to violence in youth. It's not the sole, but it does have its contributions.